So before the files came out, right, I was briefly up to date as far as, or at least I thought I was. You know what I mean? With a lot of the conspiracy theories about the JFK assassination. I thought I was. But clearly, some people have way more of an obsession with it. Don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. It's the only way I can categorize it. But some people have way more information, and this has truly intrigued me. So I want to start the video off by saying this. Can y'all reference me some movies to watch, right? Or documentaries to watch that I may not have seen, so I could check those out. And I'm looking for any type of JFK footage or videos where people talk about it that I can react to within copyright, okay? Because that would be the issue. So we're gonna start with this one, man, and look at some news clips or different things that came out here recently with them talking about it and interviewing people. But this one starts it out. This one is why people think this photo of JFK's killer is fake. So we gonna get into it. If you new, man, hit that like button, join the fam, and let's check it out.
U.S. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. Within hours of his death, a gun was found in a nearby building, and police arrested the accused killer, Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald denied it.
I didn't shoot anybody.
He said somebody had set him up.
I'm just a patsy.
But when the Dallas police searched his belongings...
Even hearing that audio, it sounds like he already kind of had that ready to go to say. Like he kind of practiced what he was going to say, even though it was few words. But just hearing that audio, go back and listen. It just sounded like, who uses that? I'm a patsy. Now, I don't know. I wasn't there back then to know if that was, you know, the lingo back then. That was how people talk or spoke, you know? I would have thought somebody had been like, it wasn't me, I was framed. But a patsy, that seemed different. Like when you hire somebody to do a job and you sit down and you briefing them about what the job is gonna be, and they're asking questions and you look at them and you say, no, you're gonna be the patsy. That's what that seemed like to me. And if I'm reading too much into it, good. Because that's what we have to do with this whole thing. And I'm learning that as I go along, is that we need to read more into things than the surface presents it.
They found these. 2 photos of Oswald posing in his backyard, holding the gun that killed the president. The photos definitively linked Oswald to the murder weapon and made the case against him airtight in the minds of investigators. But when they showed Oswald the photos, he insisted they were fakes and that his head had been superimposed onto someone else's body to frame him. The next day, Oswald was shot to death while in police custody, sparking rumors that the US government was covering up the real story of the assassination and who else might be involved. And this photo, which has been scrutinized, deconstructed, and reconstructed ever since, is at the heart of it.
Now that's interesting. Now, if we stare at this photo long enough, our eyes will start to make us think that this photo could be potentially photoshopped, right? So I'm telling you, try it with a photo. Take a photo that's in your house and just stare at it for a long period of time. Eventually you'll start thinking, is this photo real? It's just something with our brains or our mind that does that, you know? But did they have those type of capabilities back then like that? Never really thought about that. Never really knew that they had those capabilities. And if so, when did they start doing that? Take me back. Take me back to that time. When did they start, or when did y'all start? For those of us that were alive back then, when did y'all hear about that type of thing happening in those times?
Reconstructed ever since is at the heart of it. After Kennedy's assassination, government investigators spent 10 months compiling evidence and concluded that Oswald alone killed the president, an explanation the public has doubted ever since. Conspiracy theorists argue that a powerful entity like the KGB, CIA, Mafia, or Kennedy's successor to the presidency had to be involved in such a high-profile murder. And if these photos are fake, it suggests a far-reaching conspiracy framed Oswald for a crime he said he didn't commit, or at least didn't commit on his own. This is the most notorious of the backyard photos. It appeared on the cover of Life magazine in February 1964 and circulated in global newspapers. People were quick to notice something odd. The rifle on the cover of Life had a telescopic sight, and in other news outlets, the scope was gone. The news outlets explained they retouched the photo before printing and inadvertently altered the appearance of the rifle. But the controversy...
Wait a minute. What? What? Now, if we don't think people in news stations are somewhat caught up or in cahoots with people in law enforcement, governmental agencies, then you don't need to be going through this case with us, because that's exactly some of the people that are linked. How you think these stories get out? Because they have certain people at certain news stations that they know and are familiar with who they contact. Who's always the first to get the story, the scoop, the exclusive. So they tapped a resource. They had to have tapped a resource. Y'all gonna make my brain explode, bro. I can see this right now.
He convinced people around the world the photo was fake.
And of course, if it was fake, now who faked it and why did they fake it? And it opens up this whole can of worms.
This guy knows a lot about photo fakes.
My name is Hani Farid. I'm a professor here at the University of California, Berkeley, and I specialize in digital imaging forensics. I work on criminal cases, on civil cases, where the authenticity of an image or a video has been called into question.
Farid is also the latest in a long line of experts that have used science to try to figure out if the photo of Lee Harvey Oswald is real.
Oh, that's amazing. You have the original.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So what is the problem with this photo?
Okay, first of all, I assume I can keep this. There were 4 things that people consistently point to in the photo as purported evidence of manipulation. First and foremost is people have argued that the lighting and the shadows in the photo are physically impossible. In particular, if you look on the ground, there is this long shadow to his right, but if you look on his face, the shadow from his nose seems to be coming directly down. So people were saying, oh, his head was spliced into a photo of somebody else holding the gun and the lighting was wrong. That was number 1. Number 2 is that if you look at Oswald in the photo, he has this pretty bulky chin. It's quite broad. But if you look at his mugshots and other photos of him, he seems to have this very tapered chin. So that added...
That's clear. I don't know if y'all can see that, but with my 2 eyes, and I might need glasses one day, but that's not called into question right now. That his chin is very wide in that magazine photo. Very almost like he lift weights or something like that. How you develop that square chin. You see a lot of bodybuilders whose their face get more defined and strong and doing different things, going too far in the weight room. Yeah, he had that type of chin, just not the body to go with it. So yeah, that's a good. Whoever pointed that out, bro, you're good. You're really, really good, because that was a good catch. I see that clearly.
Look at his mugshot.
Look at that. That is 2 totally different chins. That's 2 totally different chins. Nah, if you ask me which way I'm leaning or swaying towards, I'm swaying towards that the photo is Photoshop right now.
And other photos of him, he seems to have this very tapered chin. So that added to the evidence, if you want to call it that this isn't really his face, that the chin seems to be too broad.
The contradictory shadows and the broad chin are the most commonly cited signs of alleged tampering. This theory even made its way into this scene in Oliver Stone's 1991 film JFK, starring Gary Oldman as Oswald.
Well, I never saw this picture. That is my face, but my face has been superimposed.
Look at the way the shadows on the nose fall in a straight line like it's high noon. But the shadow down here on the ground reads more like late afternoon or early morning.
Number 3 is that in the photo, the gun seems to be shorter than the actual gun that was used to kill the president. And then number 4 was that his posture seems odd. It seems like he's sort of leaning back and he should be unstable holding that gun like that. And so when you look at the photo, yeah, at first glance, something looks a little weird there. And so that's what has been around this photo for a long time.
In the 1960s and 1970s, forensic experts tried just about everything to test the authenticity of this photo. Examined it at various exposures to check for signs of tampering, didn't find any. Photographed the rifle that killed Kennedy at various distances and angles to compare it to the weapon in the backyard photo, the dimensions matched. Side-by-side analysis with Oswald's mugshot confirmed it was him. They also took photos with Oswald's seized.
How? Then you have to question, okay, who's making these analyses? Who's confirming that the photo is real? You have to look at everybody suspiciously at this point now. Because, go to that. And when they line up the line, look, I'm going to try to stop it if we come. Let me go back a little bit more. I'm going to try to stop it so we can see. And even when you line those lines up, there's no way that's the same chin. Unless they was giving out chin surgeries back then that we ain't know about. That is not the same chin.
And angles to compare it to the weapon in the backyard photo, the dimensions matched. Side-by-side analysis.
There's space in the bottom 2 corners on the picture on the left. Bottom 2 corners has like a little pinch of space in between, on the outside of his chin, right? In that box. It's look at the other picture on the right. You don't see that much space. The chin here on the left is more narrow coming in. It comes into a point. So what y'all gonna say? He gained some weight? He was eating good? Is that what it was from the picture? He lost weight? After the assassination, he lost weight or something like that? He was killed, what was it, 2 days later or on the way to the county jail?
Analysis with Oswald's mugshot confirmed it was him. They also took photos with Oswald's seized camera to check if the unique artifacts specific to the negatives produced by that camera, in this case, these 11 scratch marks, would appear across other photos. They did, meaning the backyard photos were taken with Oswald's camera. Investigators even recreated the photo numerous times to see if the shadow angles were possible in a single image, most successfully in this one, taken exactly 4 years after the original at the same hour in Oswald's former backyard. The shadows matched up, straight down on the face and at an angle for the body. They concluded again and again that the backyard photos were taken with Oswald's camera and there were no signs of fakery. But even presented with the facts, the controversy surrounding the photo persisted.
And I think that is baked into conspiracies. Anything that is inconsistent with your core belief is simply evidence that that person is part of the conspiracy to keep information from you.
Check out this mail-order videotape, Fake, made by famous conspiracy theorist and amateur photographer Jack D. White, who was obsessed with debunking the authenticity of this photo.
Let me show you the results of my photo analysis and see if you too can detect the graphics blunders which prove that a powerful conspiracy resulted in the death of President Kennedy.
This guy was quoted in national media as an expert, and in a 1978 BBC television documentary, an actual forensics expert felt confident that
one can only conclude that Oswald's head has been stuck onto a chin.
the flaw in these approaches is that people tend to overestimate their ability to determine real-world physics from a single two-dimensional image.
And it turns out we're really, really bad at it when it comes to certain things, like shadows, like reflections and mirrored surfaces. But if you think about it, that shouldn't be surprising. This thing here, the visual system, didn't evolve over millions and millions of years to reason about a flat piece of paper.
So Fareed and his team reconstructed the scene using 3D modeling software to rule out the 4 problems of the photo.
The shadows, the shape of the chin, the length of the gun, and the posture.
Here's how they built it.
So we know a couple of things about Oswald. We know how tall he was and what his weight was around the time that he was arrested. So what you're seeing here is a 3-dimensional model that has been scaled to his height in real world units.
They added Oswald's known weight to the model and posed it to match the stance in the photo, adding the weight of the guns he's holding to test its balance. Oswald's mugshot provided a reference for the narrow chin and shape of the nose. Finally, they lit the scene with a single light source, moving it around until the shadows looked just right. You can see how closely the 3D model matches the original photo in this overlay image.
It means that we have a 3-dimensional model of Oswald and the sun and the ground plane that is consistent with whatever was happening in that physical scene in 1963.
Now, they could examine the shadows.
He has this long shadow down from his nose. He has this long shadow cast back into his right, and those are consistent with a single light source. So it just turns out that shadows sometimes look weird. So what happens to that very tapered chin is it suddenly becomes very fat. Well, why? It's actually not the shape of his chin, it's just a shadow. So number 2, the chin of Oswald is consistent with what you see in the photo. The gun, which we know the measurement of, is perfectly consistent with the photo. There's nothing wrong with it. It's exactly the right size.
And lastly, the physics of the pose.
You are stable standing up when that center of mass that projects straight down onto the floor is encompassed by your feet. We have a 3D model of Oswald. We know where his mass is. We project that downward. And what you see here is that it is well within the bounding area of his feet, which means the pose with the gun and the weird backward tilt that he's doing is perfectly physically plausible.
Some people might never let this photo go, but ultimately,
I see why, because I can't let it go. I can't. The entire time he talking, it's cringing. It's cringy to me. The entire time he's speaking, because I feel like they're playing us for fools. And I just recently, like I've done videos in the past of JFK, and the videos of the past and different things that I knew then, but now my thirst for information has gone up, and I just feel like they just sometimes look at us like we're dumb. And that's far from the case. Like, no, that chin, I will not let that. There's no way you can make me unsee that now. I just can't.
the simplest explanation is usually the strongest.
I think you've got to start to ask, how complicated is your explanation of what happened? Is it plausible that in 1963, somebody manipulated a photo to be fully consistent in a way that an analysis 50 years later cannot find evidence of manipulation? I do not find that a compelling argument. So when you start to chip away that any artifact in the image, anything in the image that you think is evidence of tampering that we can start to now explain away, at some point you get to the end and you say, okay, the only plausible explanation that is left is that the image is authentic, and now you have to move on.
I talked to another scientist.
And that was the part that the argument that I was saying in the beginning, where I was like, you know, being able to do that back then, to have those capabilities. So that's one part that I will give them, because even in my mind, I'm like, how could they have done it? It's just like ancient civilizations and stuff like that, when they talk about them with technology, or how they were able to carve these rocks and stone and fusing them together, and they still stand all these years later. The fact that we don't know how it was done doesn't negate the fact that it took place and it happened. We have proof. So that's the part of me that won't allow me to just say it's no possible way they could have did that back then. They ain't have the capabilities or the technology. I know too much about what ancient civilizations have done. So that's what hinders me or holds me back from being like, but no, it's not possible.
After more than 60 years, we are finally getting access to some government files related to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There are 80,000 of them, so we've got a whole team of CBS News people working their way through the documents. That includes Caitlin Huey-Burns, who's going to join us now. Caitlin, good morning. What have you and the others found so far?
Hey, Tony, good morning. Well, President Trump told reporters ahead of this release that there would be a lot of reading to do, and boy, he was not wrong. I can personally attest to that. These documents total 80,000 pages, and as you mentioned, we had a whole team of reporters here at CBS going through them, and many of these files have already been released before, and if you're one of those who were looking for any proof of conspiracy, you will likely be disappointed.
More than 60 years after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the Trump administration released 80,000 pages of records to the public Tuesday night relating to his murder. Culling through the files is a tedious task. The scanned documents, many handwritten and going back over 60 years, can be at times difficult to read and decipher. Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who shot Kennedy in November of 1963, is mentioned 55 times in the documents, including in this 79-page summary of CIA surveillance operations that monitored Oswald's movements in Mexico City, where he visited the Russian and Cuban embassies ahead of the assassination. And in this...
All that paperwork and he's only mentioned 55 times? I would have thought his name would have been all throughout it. See, this thing continuously throws you a curveball. This case, it throws you a curveball. Who else would have thought his name would only be in there 55 times? No way.
This letter, written in 1978 from a man to the British ambassador in Washington. In it, he says he told immigration officials in London that in July of 1963, just 4 months before the assassination, of a plan by Oswald to kill Kennedy. But so far, the trove of mostly unredacted files show there is nothing that changes he was the sole assassin.
The documents, they don't show conspiracy.
David Barrett, a professor of political science at Villanova University who studies the Kennedy presidency, says that while these files are not a smoking gun, they provide government transparency.
Maybe it will lessen the suspicion that the FBI or the CIA or some other government leader or agency were involved in a plot to kill Kennedy.
Why would we turn away from the conspiracy theories? They got us here, first and foremost. And if we're expecting things to be tampered with, look who was in charge after he was assassinated. The person that they thought could potentially have had something to do with it. So if we're thinking that files aren't gonna read, look who was in charge, LBJ. Am I tripping? Am I tripping? If we're thinking stuff is going to be missing or not in there or not pointing to conspiracies, it's just all pointing to Oswald, then to me that screams, yeah, those files were tampered with. Those files were written away and things might have been left out to keep certain names out of it.
The Trump administration says the release represents a campaign promise kept, a promise he made the day Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsed him.
I have never had more people ask me, please, sir, release the documents on the Kennedy assassination, and we're going to do that.
And during a visit to the Kennedy Center on Monday, he announced they were ready to go.
So people have been waiting for decades for this. I don't believe we're going to redact anything.
Now, anyone can see these documents on the National Archives website, and more are going to be added once they are digitized, but others still remain under court seal. Now, you may remember the president's executive order also demanded the files from the assassinations of Robert F. Kennedy and of Martin Luther King Jr. to be released, but it's not yet clear when those will be published. Gail?
All right, Caitlin, got it. Thank you very much.
I was digging and I found this. George Bush's early association with the CIA. This is back in 1988 from a radio TV report. And this is where it gets interesting. They're having a conversation about George Bush's early association with the CIA. This person, Joseph McBride, said that he was originally researching about the Kennedy assassinations. And as he was looking through the FBI files that were released 10 years ago, I just came across George Bush's name, and it was a surprise to me. I really didn't know that he was with the CIA back then. Now, take us back to this painting that was found in Jeffrey Epstein's house. So is it possible that George Bush Sr. took out JFK because JFK knew that George Bush Sr. planned an inside job on 9/11 and did not get to actually make it through, and George Bush Jr. actually finished the job? This is just my speculation, and this is alleged, but let me know what y'all think in the comments, because this is really throwing me for a loop.
So I know by now we've all heard about the JFK files, if not read some of it. Well, here's what is mind-boggling, that people have ever believed that the shot was fired from over here in the balcony on the side when his head went completely back. Suspect. Also, yeah, we all know that he was meeting with the CIA for weeks and weeks leading up to it. Or I'm not surprised. Are you? If you are, do a little more digging on the CIA and the FBI and how corrupt things are. Meanwhile,
Now let me ask you guys, because a lot of y'all been following this case a lot longer than I have. Again, I'm still a newbie to this compared to everybody who's been following this thing. Do you think he could have possibly, or they could have been possibly, the CIA, meeting with him to gain information or just route information, like direct route information? A lot of people knew about what was going on, was going to be there and stuff like that. But did they want to know specifics to be able to set up? That's what normally happens when you see, like, in movies or something like that. I hate to reference movies, but let's reference movies. You know, The Shooter. When they went and got Bob Lee Swaggart, that's like one of my favorite movies. You know, they were talking to him to get how he would do things, how he would do that and stuff like that, right? So speaking to Kennedy, they could figure out, okay, we'll be coming down the road like this. And they could be speaking to him in a way that says, okay, we need to protect you. We need to make sure everything's in place. How will you be coming down the road? Which side will you be on? Which seat in the back, all the way down to the most minute of details. Think that's a possibility of something they could have been doing? It's just a thought when she said that triggered that thought in my brain.
I guess the astronauts are back from the desert in Arizona or wherever they are.